With so much happening in people's lives, so many changes, so many transitions, we find that today's first reading is a really good source to discover God's presence in all of this. So let's consider that first reading that we heard from Genesis. Now, some biblical scholars have said that that passage is the key transition story to the entire book. It is a significant moment in Genesis, and that moment is reflected in all of our lives, in our significant moments, because this is a story of divine initiative. History has been given some direction. A divine plan is beginning to unfold. But first, Abram and Sarah must leave home and begin a journey to a place that's not seen, only promised. And this journey will not take them to a permanent home. They will always be aliens in the land in which they dwell. But we are the recipients of their faith in God. For God plans to bring blessings on all of us who are descendants of the couple who trusted that God would lead them to a new promised land, a new Eden. The command that they receive from God is, go forth. That speaks to all of us. All of us who at one time or another had to pack up and go, had to leave one way of living in trade for another. Some have gone because the change promised a better future. Immigrants, couples planning a marriage, students going off to college, people leaving school to begin their careers. Others of us hear the command, go forth, because something tragic has happened to them. Witness the plight of millions of refugees from Africa and the Middle East. And closer to home, we've experienced divorce, death, the aging of a parent that calls for a shift and unplanned for accommodations in living. Our own aging causes changes in us. We no longer feel like the persons that we once were. Our job might require a reluctant move. Or maybe we might even lose a job. All require a journey from one state of being to another. We know what we are leaving, but we do not know how it will go or where it will end, who we will be when it is all over. Can we let go of what we have known and find new meaning and significance for our lives, even a new life? Will God be with us? Such significant changes and shifts, that's kind of a death. And so we ask, is there life beyond that kind of grave? Some going forths have been our own choices for a new life, and others have been thrust upon us. But underneath this tale of Abraham and Sarah, we find a common story that we all participate in. All of our stories have the same characteristic. They contain some kind of change and conflict along the way to a new life. That's the hope that this story of Abraham stirs up. The promise that things won't be easy, But what makes the end hopeful is that God promises to go forth along with us. This story is about a migrant, desert, tent-dwelling people. You know, that tent image, that's a good one. It reminds us of the expression, pulling up stakes. That image always was painful to me. Stakes have been pounded into the ground, and they hold that tent nice and taut, keep it from collapsing. And now we have to pull up those stakes, often with great effort. And when we do, the dwelling collapses. There's no more place. Where will the next put down stakes? For how long? Who's going to be there with us? I think, too, of the expression, no matter where you go, there you are. We go with ourselves. What do we take with us? Have we nurtured the Spirit within us so that it can survive in the trust in God? Now, that story that we heard from the Israelites, they're telling that story from the end. They're looking back at the footprints in the sand, and they're noticing God's footprints alongside theirs. But that was not the way they felt when they were first going through it. And that feeling might not have been so good. God maybe felt absent to them. But that Genesis tale reminds us that all the evidence is not in yet. That's where our hope lies. That is the sign of God's presence in our lives. That is our vision. We live such regular, ordinary lives most of the time that a sign like that, a vision like that, may get us stirred up and enthusiastic again. Now, we don't get that big splash or the special vision on the mountain like those disciples did. Instead, we hear a voice. That's the sign of God's presence. We hear that voice telling us to listen to Jesus. And listening to him does not just mean tending to his words, but to everything his life reveals to us about how we're supposed to live as children of God. And you know, sometimes that's real tough, because there are other, more attention-getting voices that are out there. And those voices, they're loud, flashy, and sound very important. They pursue us. They promise us a better life. If only we get that new slick car, or the latest, fastest computer, or a larger house, a Caribbean vacation, designer clothes. And our country listens to other voices too. There are voices that want to put our country first no matter what effects our self-interests have on other, more vulnerable people. Do you know that there are starving infants in Africa who are currently dying while our military budget is about to be increased at the expense of life-saving social programs? All these needs are stirred up to us in a cacophony of voices that shout at us every single day. And they shout at our children too. They begin to lure them at an age when they are not yet prepared to discern the true needs from the false ones. And what about our deeper needs that this Lent shines a bright light on? The needs that only God can fulfill. The need to know lasting and unconditional love. The need to experience forgiveness and have the chance to start all over again. the need to have hope for a life that does not give out after we've pulled up stakes. The voice we should be listening to speaks from a cloud, and it puts us in touch with the source of true wisdom. It guides us to a life that is worth living and dying for. Jesus lived on the brink of shame and disaster. He will die a horrible death. And yet we are told today that he and Abraham were honored by God. These stories turn our attention to the only voice that we can really trust to fulfill our deepest needs. With the disciples, we raise our eyes and we see nobody else but Jesus. And so may this Lent be a clarifying time for us. May it be a time when our eyes are focused and see no other way, no other destiny for us but Jesus. During Lent, we will need to listen to him and then go forth, to see the meaning not only of his words, but of his life and of his death that happened on another mountain.